Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Randall Pinkston and our panelists for a discussion on sparking a global service movement.
Take your time, Ms. Nunn. Have a seat. Okay, hello everyone.
Okay.
Please. We had thought about standing to do the event, but 30 minutes too much to talk and stand at the same time. Thank you so much for joining us. We have with us a panel of experts in service and volunteerism. They will be specializing in what we are doing and can do for people who are not only on these shores, but abroad. My first guest to my immediate left is Mr. Ray Chambers. He was born in Newark, New Jersey, attended college at Rutgers and Seton Hall, graduated from both. He is the member of the President's Council on Service and Civic Participation. He is the founding chairman of the New Jersey Center for Performing Arts. He is also the former chairman of Westway Capital Corporation, which he co-founded with William E. Simon. But we're going to talk today about his involvement in volunteerism and service in tackling global challenges, specifically what he has been able to do with his partners in terms of dealing with malaria, and as the United Nations Special Envoy for financing the Health Millennium Development Goals for malaria. Wiping it out is the goal. Mr. Ray Chambers. Our next guest is Michelle Nunn. She is the CEO of CARE. She was born in Georgia from a political family. You can hold your applause. She's not running for any office yet, or again, I should say. Her grandfather was a mayor. Her dad had a pretty important political position as well, U.S. Senator Sam Nunn. She majored in history, has a law degree. She founded in 1989 Hands on Atlanta, which was concurrent with President Bush's founding of the Points of Light Foundation, which eventually, as most of you know, merged, and Ms. Nunn was the CEO of the merged organization for a number of years. Right now, she is the CEO of CARE, which is an organization that fights global policy, Michelle Nunn. And our third guest, last but not least, is Ms. Tuki Turner from Uganda. She has traveled thousands of miles, what, 10,000 miles? About 10,000 miles to be with us today. That alone merits applause, I think. She is also an attorney, but her path to becoming a lawyer was a long and arduous one, beginning in her village in Uganda, where her father and her mother were teachers. Her father built a school where she worked and taught herself, and even after going to law school, would return to help the children. I think I heard her say earlier that initially they were using the sand to learn to make their letters, not whiteboard is what we have today in schools, or blackboard in our day, but the sand on the ground.
Yes.
And sticks for pencils.
Sticks for pencils.
And grass thatched rooftop for the school building. She is now engaged in trying to battle issues of gender inequality and specifically violence against women through her organization, Mifumi. It was founded in 1995, and she uses as part of her strategy women to help deal with issues of violence against women, specifically focusing on bride price. And with that tease, I will begin the first question with you, Ms. Turner. What is bride price?
Right. Thank you very much, Randall. Bride price is the payment that a man makes to the parents of his bride in exchange for marriage. And it's usually paid in terms of cows or money. And initially, it was a form of appreciation. It was given to thank the parents of the bride for raising her and also as a form of compensation because the family would be losing her labor. She'd be leaving her home and going to the new home. So, but it's changed over the years.
Now, is it akin to what we used to call a dowry?
It's very similar to dowry. Dowry is paid in most of the Asian countries, and the difference is dowry is paid by the woman's family to the man's family. So this woman comes with a price, a price that she brings to the marriage, and it's very similar because bride price dehumanizes women. The men feel that they have bought her and can treat her as they like. So women are seen as mere possession. And with dowry, the men feel perhaps the woman hasn't brought enough dowry. And so they're also subjected to things like, you might have heard of acid brides.
Acid brides?
Acid, yes, acid brides, because they burn the brides in acid. And there's also a lot of paraffin that they use to burn the women. So the men feel this woman hasn't brought enough dowry, and so she's also mistreated. So either way, the women don't get a rough deal. How
did you discover that? I mean, because I understand that when you were growing up there, you didn't know this existed. How did you know? How did you find out about it?
I found out about it when we opened the first domestic violence advice center in Uganda in 1999. My mother made me aware of the existence of bride price because she said, if you really want to get to the root cause of violence against women, you must address bride price. And I was thinking, what about bride price? It shouldn't be a big deal because this is a lovely culture, it's romantic. When people are getting married, they take gifts. All of us like gifts. But when we began to look into it, we found that 60% of all our cases were related to bride price because of the fact that a man feels he's had to pay a lot. Because over the years, it has become very much commercialized. It's now seen as a business. So parents ask for exorbitant amounts of money.
Is it legal?
I beg your pardon?
Is it legal?
It's not.
It is not legal?
It is, well, now it's illegal.
It is now illegal?
It's just been outlawed. And in fact, we're really celebrating our victory right now in Uganda because on Thursday, the 6th of August this year, the Supreme Court of Uganda ruled that the bride price refund is unconstitutional and therefore outlawed. And women in... Thank you. Thank you. And women are still celebrating. Well, it's a big, big victory for us because it set a precedent in all of Africa, and it's really groundbreaking because for the first time, culture can no longer be used as an excuse to punish women. And this has also attracted international attention because harmful practices in the name of culture, in the name of religion, is really the main frontier in which the fight for women's rights is now being fought.
Thank you very much. I will have a few more questions for you, but let's move now to Ms. Nunn. Tell us, for those of us who don't know, what does CARE do?
So first of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. It is great to be with old friends and to be bridging my work in citizen engagement, civic action, volunteer service with my new role at CARE, where we are really working to eradicate extreme poverty. There's over 1 billion people that live in extreme poverty, and we are doing that by lifting up women and girls, because we know that that is a proven strategy to not only lifting up women and girls, but also families, communities, and nations. We work in 90 different countries around the world, and we touched last year 72 million people.
What do you define as extreme poverty?
People who are living on less than $1 a day. So you can imagine what that means in terms of people's livelihood or lack thereof, their capacity to provide even the most basic shelter, food, nutrition for their food, schooling for their children.
Your focus on women as the way out of this problem reminds me of Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank, which made microloans targeted to women because it was believed that women would be better entrepreneurs, believe it or not, than men would in terms of bringing the monies back into the families. Are there any parallels that CARE is employing with respect to enterprise
Yeah.
for women.
Yeah. So we do know that when women earn an extra dollar, that they are 10 times more likely to spend it on their own family in terms of their, again, nutrition for their children, education for the kids in that household. CARE has a great example of this, and it touches upon, I think, this idea of citizen empowerment and how people can be engaged in lifting themselves up. It was actually started in the early 1990s with a group of Peace Corps volunteers and a CARE staff in a village in Niger, a small gathering of 20 women. And what they decided to do was to pool their resources each week to save a little bit of money over the period of a year. And they called their efforts Village Savings and Loan. And each member had the opportunity to borrow a little bit of that money to start their own businesses. There are now 10 million women and men that are participating in these circles of Village Savings and Loan.
Since '94.
Yes, and so imagine the power of these individual groups. And not only are they saving money and creating entrepreneurs and small businesses, but they also are becoming platforms for community health, for learning from one another about how they can be civically and politically involved. So there's an enormous amount that we can do to unleash, I think, the power and capacity of people, again, to lift themselves up and to lift their neighbors up.
One more question for you, Ms. Nunn. What do you do in societies where citizen engagement is seen as a threat to the government, as a possible political challenge to the people who are in power?
One of the fundamental tenets of CARE's programming is participatory engagement. And so at the root of our belief and our work is that people need to be able to fulfill their own talents and their capacities and to be able to help one another. That takes on, in some instances, very easy things that we can talk about, issues around health, issues around sexual and reproductive and family planning issues. But sometimes it does get into claiming political and civic power. And for the most part, we find that communities embrace that opportunity and are hungry for the capacity, again, to make a difference in their own communities and, in some instances, to take on political leadership in their communities and countries.
Mr. Chambers, Malaria No More. How did that start? What kind of rate of success have you had?
Thank you. To finish the circle and connect with the audience, I was the founding chairman of the Points of Light Foundation when President Bush started it. And then I came back to be chairman when Hands On and Points of Light merged, and we were fortunate enough to have Michelle Nunn become our CEO, and she brought us to new heights. But I got involved in malaria about 9 years ago, having learned that 1.2 million children were dying every year from a mosquito bite under the age of 5, and almost all in sub-Saharan Africa. And I found out that these insecticide-treated mosquito nets really worked because this particular mosquito only bit after 10 o'clock at night. You could get 3 children under a net, and when the mosquito landed on the net, the mosquito died because of the insecticide, and that disrupted the reproductive cycle. So we set out to try and reduce deaths from malaria to as close to zero as possible, from 1.2 million a year. So using every marketing trick that I learned in business, we were able to raise $10 billion. We covered 1 billion people with mosquito nets, and we've saved the lives of 6.2 million children.
Just with mosquito nets. Fantastic. Do you see that model of what you were able to do to reduce malaria applicable to other issues of global poverty, global problems?
So the Secretary General asked me 3 years ago, under the heading of No Good Deed Goes Unpunished, to take on HIV, TB, maternal mortality, and child mortality. So we did extrapolate a lot of the principles we applied to malaria, and we built a huge organization in Africa with 49 heads of state to begin to take responsibility for solving those problems instead of the age-old paternalistic approach, thinking that we can solve those problems from New York or Washington or Geneva. So we've been able to reduce child mortality by 50% and maternal mortality by 2/3.
Fantastic. Congratulations, sir.
Randall, can I
Yes,
just jump
please,
in?
yes.
I just want to, Ray is an extraordinary visionary, and I think there's a challenge for this audience to think about this in part in the way that Ray did, which is he took an enormous and complex global public health challenge, but he gave us all an opportunity to feel like we could be a part of solving the problem by talking about a bed net. And you know, my kids understand what it means for them to contribute $10 to buy a bed net. And you know, there have been thousands and millions of people around the world that are now feel like they're enlisted in this campaign. And so I think one of the opportunities that we have and that the people in this audience have is to help us connect these big, complex problems in ways that global citizens can feel that they have a role and a responsibility and the capacity to make a difference. And that's what I hope that you all will go away thinking about, is how do we take these really macro, big, you know, how do you solve a problem of 1 billion people in poverty and break it down so that people can, again, feel their own capacity to make that difference?
You're doing that in Atlanta with Walk, what is it, Walk Atlanta?
We have, CARE is searching for some of these ideas. How do we take these bite-sized opportunities for people to engage? And so we actually just launched in a 90-day period kind of a small bet and created a Walk for Lasting Change in celebration of the International Day of the Girl, and reminding people that we have 62 million girls, for instance, that are not in school. CARE just issued a report. There are 26 countries that we work in where a girl is more likely to be married before the age of 18 than she is to ever walk into a high school. Yeah. And so how do you make that real for people? And for us, it was, let's have people do a walk. Let's actually remind them of how often girls are walking to school, walking to fetch water instead of going to school, and literally giving people a chance to walk in the shoes of a girl around the world. Just one small example, but we need a lot of those kinds of examples to build the kind of global citizen movement that we want to spark here.
And is the Walk movement spreading beyond Atlanta?
We hope so. So I've told our team we had 1,000 people this year, and we want, you know, tens of thousands next year. And we want people to also be doing virtual walks, to be walking each day and being reminded, this is how you've just walked as far as Jennifer in Ghana walks to get to school. And you know, just a reminder of how we are in solidarity with people around the world.
And so is there a financial contribution connected to the walking?
Next year.
Next year, okay.
We're adding a financial component because, again, we want to raise resources, but we also, I think the challenge that we have and that we, again, want this audience to think about is how do you engage people not only in giving their resources, but also their time and their talent?
Yeah.
So talk to me about the volunteers that you use, Ms. Turner, and the kind of challenges they face in places where bride price is still seen as a protected custom and not an illegal act.
Yes, Mifumi has an army of volunteers, and we find this very, very helpful because even though we've tackled issues like bride price and violence against women, attitudes are still very negative towards women. The laws are still not enforced. Uganda has a Domestic Violence Act. So we work with about 11,000 women in the community, and they support women. They make them aware of the services that exist. They educate communities. In fact, they're almost seen as neighborhood watchdogs. And the women have to be very, very careful. We call them human rights defenders because we've tackled a very difficult culture. You know, bride price, for instance, the parents view their daughters as a source of income. So they pull them out of school and force them into marriages. So if you're trying to stop this, you're actually interfering with their, with their income.
So the family deliberately sends the daughter into marriage in order to get money. And what is the age range of these brides, the youngest?
The brides are Young as 13.
13.
They're as young as 13. And
What happens if she wants to leave? Can she?
the problem with leaving is this very difficult culture of refund. So if a woman wants to leave an abusive relationship, or if a girl wants to leave, she cannot leave unless the bride price is refunded. That's almost the worst aspect of that culture, and that's something we've been fighting. If a woman dies, her parents can refuse the burial from taking place. And so they're haggling over bride price because bride price hasn't been paid and the body is lying decaying. That's something that shows that bride price has been following people, even up to death. And then widows are inherited because they're seen as property. So we had the case of a young girl called Natalina. She was married 3 times to 3 brothers. After each one died, the next one inherited her because bride price makes people think a woman is property. So our volunteers are out there, an army of volunteers from the US, from the UK, a lot of them from Uganda, all fighting and challenging this custom and making sure people realize that women deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
The clock is reading 0. I would like to continue. Do I have permission to ask one more question? Just one more? To you, Mr. Chambers. You are an expert in raising funds for a whole range of issues. I'm wondering if someone is sitting out here right now and wants to become engaged in assisting people abroad as a volunteer, what would be a first step that you would recommend they would take?
Yeah, there are so many organizations like CARE that are so worthy and deserving of support, and just going on the website is an incredible thing to do. But just 2 weeks ago, Gallup came out with a survey, and now that the Millennium Development Goals are winding down, we adopted the Sustainable Development Goals at the United Nations 2 weeks ago, and the Gallup poll concluded the only way the world will achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is with 1 billion volunteers. So now, with what Points of Light has done and everybody in the audience, we're seeing volunteerism truly becoming global. And with that, I think we will have a chance at reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are hundreds of websites of those volunteer organizations that anybody here could connect with. I wanted to say one last thing. September 21st was International Day of Peace, and we wanted to raise the visibility, and so we created with Viners and Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, hashtag Forgive for Peace, and we reached 1.7 billion people. But the one thought that came out of this that's reflective of what we've heard here today, and it's something that's easy to grasp. If there were true gender equality in this world, we would have world peace.
Good.
I want to thank our panelists, Mr. Chambers, Ray Chambers, Michelle Nunn, Atuki Turner, and by the way, there is a link to her documentary on bride price for those of you who want to take a look on the web at the documentary about that practice in Uganda and in other locations around Africa. Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. Another round of applause for our panelists. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.